Chapter 3 From the Football Field to the Battlefield, Eugene Evans and Eli Page Howard by Ken Kratzer. Eugene Evans and Eli Page Howard made the supreme sacrifice. They gave their lives for their country. And this respectful and well-researched tribute to two unknown heroes, Pelham, New York-based radio journalist, writer, and military historian Ken Kratzer remembers two young men, athletes who made their mark at his high school alma mater, then together competed at Morgan State University, one of the first historically black colleges, and fought heroically overseas as soldiers. In this essay, we learn about Evans and Howard signing on as cadets in the brand new Reserve Officers Training Corps program started at Morgan State in response to President Harry Truman's 1948 Executive Order 9981, which directed that the military be integrated. I felt it was important to include details of their respective sacrifices in this chapter so that we may understand exactly what they did. The field of battle is far different than the football field, but if you look, you can see similarities and connections. The leadership that both men showed as young athletes translated to becoming leaders in college and in the service. Eugene Evans was a natural, charismatic, politically astute, and a lieutenant who volunteered for a dangerous mission in Korea in 1952. Colonel Howard served several years in the military. He was on his second tour of Vietnam when he was killed in action in 1969. He was 41. We are deeply grateful to Ken for keeping their story alive. May their flames burn bright. Pete Elman. Memorial Day, May 29, 2011. It is a tradition since the Civil War on Memorial Day to place American flags on the grave sites of veterans. The practice will be followed this year from Arlington National Cemetery, where 300,000 flags will be placed, to veterans' cemeteries in every state and at smaller neighborhood burial sites across the country. On Saturday, I placed a flag at the grave site in New Rochelle, New York, of Eugene Lee Evans, who was a star college football player 60 years ago. Evans, who was known as Dippy, later played on the CIAA National Championship team of Morgan State in 1949, and then, as a young married Army officer, died heroically in the Korean War just 3 years later. Evans' teammates at Pelham Memorial High School, PMHS, just north of New York City, and later in college at Morgan State, was Eli Page Tim Howard Jr. Tim was another extraordinary athlete of the late 1940s who had a long military career and also died serving our country as a U.S. Army officer in Vietnam in 1969. We were at West Point earlier this month to present an award to Cadet Stephen Anderson, the inspirational linebacker and co-captain of the Army football team, which in 2010 won the Bell Helicopter Armed Forces Bowl. In the presentation, we described the athletic exploits of these two young men from the Pelham community where I grew up and the heroism they displayed as Army officers when faced with the extreme challenges of leading troops in combat. In high school, Eugene Evans was an extraordinary athlete, quite possibly the best in the history of Pelham High. He batted .444 for the baseball team. In basketball, he was all-county. In track, he was the star high jumper. In football, he was a 3-year letterman, making the all-county and all-metropolitan as an end. Evans was co-captain of the undefeated 1945 Pelham team, which outscored its opponents 183-13. On top of his athletic achievements, Evans was respected and popular and was elected to the student council as secretary of his graduating class. When he was inducted posthumously into the inaugural class of Pelham Hall of Honor in 2009, a number of alumni of that era spoke fondly of their memories of him. Some of the old-timers told me Evans was scouted by Major League Baseball teams. We will never know where his potential as an athlete or charismatic personality might have taken him. Eli Page Tim Howard, as he was called growing up, was a year behind Evans in high school, where, as quarterback, he co captained the undefeated 1945 PMHS football team after Evans graduated. He was known as the Touchdown King. After graduation from Pelham, both Howard and Evans went on to serve in the Marine Corps during the post-war era when African Americans still trained in different camps and served in segregated units. After service in the Marine, both enrolled at Morgan State in Baltimore. The football team was led by legendary coach Eddie Hurt, who was in the middle of compiling a 173 to 54 to 18 record at the school with 14 CIAA conference titles. Two players of that era at Morgan State, Lynn Ford and Roosevelt Brown, were elected into the NFL Hall of Fame. Two players of that era at Morgan State, Lynn Ford and Roosevelt Brown, were elected into the NFL Hall of Fame. Perhaps for a moment, we can remember them as they were, star athletes playing for Morgan State College as it was known then. It is now Morgan State University. Evans and Howard led Morgan to a CIAA title in 1949, which was considered the national championship of historical black colleges. Howard was the quarterback and Evans a receiver on that undefeated 1949 team, one which outscored their opponents 227 to 33. The highlight, a November contest when they defeated arch rival Wilberforce 14 to 13 at the Polo Grounds in New York City. In 1974, Evans was named to the Morgan State Athletic Hall of Fame. In addition to football, Evans and Howard were cadets in the brand new Reserve Officers Training Corps program started at Morgan State in response to President Harry Truman's 1948 Executive Order 9981, which directed that the military be integrated. Howard excelled in military duties and was named the first cadet commander of the program, which in years that followed would be known for producing generals. Meanwhile, Evans, ever the outgoing politician, was a member of the Student Council at college, commissioner of intramural athletics, and student representative to the College Committee on Intercollegiate Athletes. In 1951, Evans went back to his alma mater in Pelham as a student teacher of physical education to finish out his senior year of college. Soon after graduation and commissioning as a second lieutenant in the Army, Evans married Mildred Onley. Just a year later, Lieutenant Evans was sent to Korea, a member of the 32nd Infantry Regiment, 7th Infantry Division. On the night of July 19, 1952, Lieutenant Evans led a scout mission across enemy lines, testing enemy positions before an anticipated battle. The small group of soldiers was ambushed. One soldier was taken prisoner and several escaped. Lieutenant Evans was killed. When we posted a story about Eugene Evans on a Korean War website, Leon Sparks, one of the soldiers who survived the mission, called to tell the story of his last mission and how much Evans was respected by the mostly white soldiers who served under him. We located Eugene Evans' widow Mildred 2 years ago and arranged a reception in her honor at Soundshore Hospital, where she has worked since the 1960s. Millie was amazing to meet. We liked and respected. Millie was amazing to meet, well liked and respected by her coworkers. On why she had never remarried, her comment was, "I never met anyone like my husband." Finding Lieutenant Evans' gravesite in the back area of the Beechwood Cemetery provided one of the moments when you connect the dots and touch history. Eli Page Howard's military service. Eli Howard graduated from Morgan State in 1951 and in June entered the service as a second lieutenant. Colonel Howard served in Korea in 1952, returned to Fort Dixon, New Jersey, and in 1957 went overseas to Germany. From June 1961 to February 1964, he was at the Armor School in Fort Knox, Kentucky. He served in Vietnam in 1964 as a senior advisor to the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. Eli also served in Korea, later in Europe, in Vietnam, and at the Pentagon in Washington, rising to the level of lieutenant colonel. For his second tour in Vietnam, Colonel Howard was named commander of the 3rd Battalion of the 196th Light Infantry Brigade. On August 19, 1969, he was leading his unit from a helicopter during a fierce battle. The helicopter was shot down amidst fighting so intense that American forces could not get to the crash site for 5 days. There were no survivors. Released by the U.S. Army on August 22, 1969, U.S. forces blocked from downed copter. Saigon. North Vietnamese troops entrenched in bunkers kept up attacks today on American infantrymen trying to reach the wreckage of a helicopter southwest of Da Nang. A U.S. spokesman estimated that the lead column of 400 men from the 196th Light Infantry Brigade was about 800 yards from the site where the North Vietnamese shot down the copter Tuesday. Every time they start moving, they draw fire, said one U.S. officer. I've never seen the enemy fight so hard, said another. Ordinarily, they'll fight for a while and then pull back, but these guys are standing their ground and fighting. Dive bombers and helicopter gunships made attack after attack on the North Vietnamese bunkers.